Hey guys, and welcome back. Today on the channel, I'm happy to bring you a new deck tech collaboration I had with another awesome MTG YouTuber, the Planeswalker Project. Now, if you're not familiar with the Planeswalker Project, it's a channel that focuses on a myriad of MTG topics with a greater emphasis on deck techs for various different formats. In this video, we'll be bringing you a flavorful commander deck featuring Tasigur the Golden Fang, the ruthless leader of the opulent Sultai on the plane of Tarkir. Now, Tasigur was instrumental in orchestrating the death of the ancient Khans of Tarkir, working with the Dragonlord Silumgar to end the Khans as they gathered together to formulate a collective resistance against the dragons. With Tasigur betraying and ultimately ending his fellow Khans at what came to be known as the Khanfall, the lavish former leader expected great rewards and a place by Silumgar's side. While Tasigur likes to believe he's a master at the deceptive arts, the Dragonlord was even better, providing him a golden collar for being such a good dog, and a spot to kneel by his master, but nothing more. While Tasigur once ruled with a golden fist, his new lot in life was one of humiliation, betraying his fellow Khans so that he may yet live, although some would consider his remaining existence as not really living at all. Regardless, as the Khans fell, the Sultai just replaced one cruel head for another, only this one had sharp fangs and acid breath. As such, the Planeswalker Project has cooked up a deck that bridges these two alternate groups into one. The Sultai, either free of dragons or handed over to them by Tasigur, still revel in the deaths of their opposition.
Tasigur, our young pampered Sultai heir, was well versed in cruelty and ruling his brood. Even under the control of Silumgar, the Sultai demanded much reverence and fear for their sheer ruthlessness. As such, we will be focusing our commander strategy on inflicting as much pain and forced sacrifice upon our opponents as we can muster. And sacrifices shall be made. We have plenty of means to ensure our opponents forfeit their beloved cards to our pleasure. Archfiend of Depravity will put our opponents on the defense, only getting to keep 2 creatures at the ends of their turns. How unfortunate for those who need plenty of creatures to stick around. Indulgent Tormentor will put the opponents on edge as well, as they have to choose to either give you more card draw or lose either life or limb. Merciless Executioner hits the field, and everyone has to sacrifice a creature. Of course, since our creatures might be dying here and there, Butcher of Malakir will force an additional sacrifice on the opponent's end. Now, of course, we will require expendables for when we must make sacrifices. Bitterblossom will make for good fodder, giving us a creature every turn, as does our Army of the Damned and Empty the Pits. These will give us plenty of disposable creatures for us to use, either as tribute or as our fighting force. If we can move past the bodies, we have a few potent cards worth mentioning. The infamous combo of Exquisite Blood and Sanguine Bond will immediately win the game for you unless an opponent acts in response. How very exquisite. Descent into Madness will slowly drain our opponents of their precious resources. Even more so, Consuming Aberration will ruin our opponents with every spell we play. Greater Good is perfect as a sack outlet, draw engine, and discard outlet to ensure we have enough resources in the graveyard to get Tasigur into play for super cheap. Necropotence is a spell that any black deck hungry for card draw ought to consider, and Tasigur is no exception. Mist of Stagnation will take advantage from having a full graveyard by giving us more untapped permanents than any of our opponents may have. As a nice means to end a game when we have plenty of creatures in the grave, Magus of the Will and Living End will give us access to much of our buried cards. Chainer, Dementia Master, and Havengul Lich also give us great access to reanimating our dead creatures. What good is sacrifice without sacrificing everything? In this deck, we do have several means of handling any large live problem boards our opponents may set us up with. All is Dust will wipe clean all boards, taking out creatures, enchantments, and pretty much anything that isn't an artifact or an Eldrazi. Damnation is Damnation. Any black deck looking to kill a lot of creatures should definitely run this. Deathcloud will take out quite a bit of the board, and even if we lose some life, we won't be the ones getting the short end of the stick by any means. Pox is a savage means to wipe out a third of your opponent's game. Cyclonic Rift isn't quite a board wipe, but it functions in such a way that your opponents won't have much left in play to defend with. Finally, Oblivion Stone and Nevinyrral's Disc are good end-alls to clear out a field. For our mana base, since we have black, blue, and green requirements, your standard assortment of fetches and duels will come into play. For this build, however, since we are able to utilize our fetch lands once they're in the graveyard either as delve fodder or for recursion using either something like Life from the Loam or Crucible of Worlds, I would recommend adding in a few more than the usual. Cephalid Coliseum will let us use a nice card draw and discard engine once we hit the threshold, which in this deck shouldn't be hard whatsoever. Ghost Quarter can be used on our own lands to help fix for our mana, as well as give us 2 more cards in the graveyard. The strategy for this deck is rather straightforward. We fill up the graveyards with value cards to either delve away to cast out Tasigur for next to nothing, and then use our varying forms of reanimation and recursion to return the cards we need to our hands or to the fields. We could take our opponent's cards from their graveyards and put them into play using things like Chainer. This gives us access to a sort of toolbox strategy where we can use cards from just about anywhere. Whether they're in the graveyard or in the deck, we have plenty of ways to move cards around. There's a great deal of control in this deck that allows us to hold off opponents from getting any form of footing in the game. If they can't hold on to their creatures without having to sacrifice them, then there's no hope for them to get ahead.
And that, guys, was the Planeswalker Project with a neat commander deck that I think packs a lot of story and flavor. These are honestly my favorite types of decks to play, ones that follow a theme of flavor either for the overall benefit or detriment to the deck. I know I'll be having fun with it either way. Anyway, I want to know what you guys think about the Sultai and this Tasigur deck in the comments below. I also want everyone who enjoyed the video to click on over to the Planeswalker Project's YouTube channel, so you can check out more of their awesome content. Show them some love by subscribing to both our channels and liking the video. It really helps support further content. You can find those links in the description below. As always, guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.